Welcome to today's 5-minute Bible study in the book of Philippians. Today we're in Philippians chapter 2. We're going to look at verses 19 through 24. As we read this paragraph, it almost seems like Paul is beginning to wrap up his letter, like he is in the concluding remarks. He's going to talk about how he's about to send Timothy to them. It sounds like he's wrapping things up. Now, he's not. We're not even quite halfway through chapter 2. But Paul, like many preachers, can't quite bring himself to conclude. Have you ever been listening to a sermon and you thought the preacher was almost in his concluding remarks, but then thinks of something else and goes on for a while? Well, Paul is going to do that in Philippians. But right now, it looks like he's going to start wrapping things up because he tells them, I'm going to send Timothy to you. Notice what he says. Begin at verse 19. I hope in the Lord Jesus to send Timothy to you soon, that I also may be cheered when I receive news about you. I have no one else like him who will show genuine concern for your welfare. For everyone looks out for their own interest, not those of Jesus Christ. But you know that Timothy has proved himself, because as a son with his father, he has served with me in the work of the gospel. I hope therefore to send him as soon as I see how things go with me, and am confident in the Lord that I myself will come soon. So while Paul is imprisoned in Rome, Timothy is there in Rome and able to help Paul's son and aid him. And now Paul is saying, I'm hoping I'll send Timothy to you very soon to give you news about me. And also when he comes back, I'll receive further news about you. Now you know Timothy, Paul says. And they did. The Philippians knew Timothy well. You recall that when we started our study, we said that the church in Philippi was founded on Paul's second missionary journey. That's recorded for us in Acts chapter 16. Now, when Paul first came to Philippi, one of his colleagues who was with him at the time was Timothy. Now, if you read in the book of Acts, you realize that Timothy was converted by Paul on his very first missionary journey. And then when Paul began his second missionary journey, he went to Timothy's hometown and saw how much this young man had advanced in the faith. And so he invited Timothy to become part of his missionary band or part of his missionary team. And from then on, Timothy is associated with Paul in his apostolic ministry. Later on, Paul will send Timothy out to ministry on his own. And that's when he writes those letters of 1st and 2nd Timothy. But anyway, when Paul first came to Philippi, Timothy was part of the missionary team. And so the Philippians know Timothy well. And so when Paul says, you know what he's like, you know how much he cares about you, you know how he's committed to the cause of Jesus Christ, they know that quite well. And so they'll be delighted when Timothy comes to visit them. They will. And they'll also be delighted to share news with him. So I'm going to send Timothy to you soon. Paul says he's like my son in the faith. And he was. Paul has sort of adopted Timothy, spiritually speaking. Paul is the spiritual father. Timothy is the spiritual son. And Timothy is absolutely committed to the work of the gospel. So he's going to come and going to bring back word to me on how you are doing. He said, in the future, I myself hope to come again. As we've already said, even though Paul's in prison and knows it could end in his execution, yet he's rather confident that he will ultimately be released. And he feels that it won't be too much longer down the road that he's able to visit the Philippians again. But in the meantime, he's going to send Timothy to them. And one more thing I want to say about Timothy, Paul shows us the importance of having people in our life whom we can pour ourselves into in the way of faith. Others have done that for us. Christians who were further along than we were helped us, they mentored us, they trained us, they discipled us, they poured themselves into us and helped us grow in faith. And we ought to also do that with the younger believers. We ought to find folks who are on the journey whom we can help, whom we can mentor, whom we can disciple as Paul discipled Timothy. And we can aid them in their faith. So every Paul needs a Timothy. Every Christian believer needs someone that they can help develop in the Christian faith, that they can pass their faith onto and help them mature. Paul did that for Timothy. Look for someone in your life whom you can be a Paul to, whom you can help as Paul helped Timothy, help them develop and grow in the faith. So Paul says, I'm going to send Timothy real soon, and he's going to visit you, and maybe before long, I myself can come. Join us next time for our next 5-minute Bible study in the book of Philippians.